the best data and actually to correlate and put AI to work in triaging alerts and remediate threats and improve the mean time to detect, mean time to response. Because in this age of in this area, you need to know that your business is targeted and your clients will be breached. It's just a matter of time, obviously.
Welcome to Syncronized, the podcast that drives MSP growth from startup to scale up. In each episode, we dive into the topics that matter most to IT providers, such as automation, AI, service delivery, and profitability. Join us as we engage with experts and gain hands-on insights and practical advice you can directly apply to propel your business forward. Let's dive in.
Hey folks, welcome to another episode of Synchronized. Really excited to be joined by Dor Eisner today, who's the CEO at Guardz. We are going to have a fun, deep, probably hectic conversation talking about AI and cybersecurity, which is one of the probably largest buckets of opportunity, stress, concern, headache that, exists in IT and in the MSP landscape right now. So I am excited to dive in. Dor, thank you so much for taking time to join us here on the show. I'd love to give you a minute to talk about yourself, about Guardz, your role, and kind of what you guys are up to, and then we'll just get into this thing.
Cool. Thank you, Brandon, for having me on the show. So quickly about myself, I'm doing cybersecurity for the last 20 plus years. Started in the Israeli intelligence force in the special unit called 8200 unit. It's like doing cybersecurity for the Israeli intelligence force and for the government for about a decade. And in the last decade, I'm building companies. Guardz is actually my first company that I'm building from scratch. And previous company was a threat intelligence company, so we learned a lot about monitoring at scale. And in the last 3 years, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Guardz, building the unified security platform for MSP to secure small businesses at scale and to leverage, this platform for all things related to security, from growing your business around security and securing your customers in a better way.
Awesome. Well, we're talking to the right guy then. You've got clearly a lot of experience and have seen a lot of the evolution in this space over the years. And you're right. You already speak to what I think is one of the sort of unique dynamics for MSPs in particular, which is you've got to secure your clients. They're already expecting that you've got them covered, because why wouldn't you? At the same time, you're running a business, you've got margins to think about, and you've got to monetize this. So it's not just protecting, it's also monetizing and building a sort of scalable security practice from a business lens, which is very different than internal IT departments or a lot of other folks that are having to, think about prevention and detection and response and kind of managing, this crazy growing attack surface that we're facing today. So very interesting, sort of unique challenge for our audience, right? That we're talking to here and that our respective companies both serve. Let's kind of start at maybe a high level. I don't want to start at too high of a level, but I think clearly AI is changing a lot of the game. Everybody wants to figure out, how do we do more with automation? How do we offload a lot of the mundane, a lot of the day-to-day, a lot of the boring? I don't have enough time or humans or skill to do all the stuff that I want to do. So great, I can take advantage of, these LLMs and these new models to, add this kind of hyper scale factor that just did not exist, 5, 6, 7 years ago in this market. On the other side of that coin is bad actors doing the same stuff. And all of a sudden, those phishing emails will start sounding a lot better because you can write them in ChatGPT, and it's, the flow and grammar and tone, right? They're not as easy to spot as they once were. Kind of packets and actual kind of malware and malicious code is easier to acquire and develop than ever before. So, Dor, at a high level, just kind of give us some of your thoughts on this double-edged sword of AI and cybersecurity. Is it more good than it is bad? Is it 50-50? Like where are you sort of seeing the balance of where we can benefit from this and where maybe we should be a little nervous about it?
I think it's about 50-50, to be honest. Let's start with discovering, what the bad guys are doing in the last few years.
Sure.
I mentioned that my previous startup was a dark web threat intelligence company. And what we discovered in the last, 5 to 7 years is that bad guys started, not today, like about 5 years ago, they started to democratizing their tools. So, the dark web and the black market, they changed, significantly by offering attack as a service tools on the different
Right.
forums. And those tools, like 5 years ago, it was, serious tools, but you can find them, in dozens in kind of black markets. Nowadays, you can find them in thousands.
Right.
So think about the evolution of the cyber criminals in the different black market forums offering their attack as a service tools. And it can be like a phishing tool as a service, malware tool as a service, fraud tool as a service, you name it. But those tools created this massive change that any junior cyber criminal can get
Right.
an attack as a service in a very cost-effective way and can start to spray and pray. And those spray and pray kind of cyber attacks are not going after the big guys, they are going predominantly after the small guys. So this change with the generative AI and all things related to the LLMs that came to our life in the last 2 years is significantly increasing and scaling from a black market perspective.
Right.
Now think about the defenders, like the highly fragmented cybersecurity stack didn't change a lot in the last 5 years. Because in order to protect your clients, in order to protect your business, you need to put 5 to 10 different tools in your arsenal because there are different attack vectors. But the biggest challenge is how you connect the dots between those different tools. And, maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, it was okay to have silo detection and to put technicians to work on this tool or on the other tool, like, to have a proper EVR or a proper email security or awareness training or data protection or whatever, or network protection. And then putting different technicians to work on different platforms and trying to do it. But the velocity of, threats or the evolution of threat, it's not really cutting it to the edge of, hey, I need to have context around the different security controls that I have in my arsenal in order to protect my clients these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are, I think, skill challenges in that as well, where not only do you have to sort of connect those dots, as you said, but it hasn't gotten easier, particularly for MSPs and small and mid-sized businesses, to find and hire the talent that knows how to read and analyze these systems and separate false positives. And if you've got 10 tools and you just have thousands and thousands of alerts getting spit out all the time, well, you haven't exactly solved the problem, because what are we going to do if there's just endless, alerts and tickets and noise coming out? Well, I'm just going to ignore that and move on to the stuff that I can actually, process and deal with and manage. So my hope is that some of the technology and LLMs and at least some of these, I don't know, maybe it's not just LLMs, but bringing more intelligence, let's call it maybe intelligent automation into some of these tools, if it's done correctly, can hopefully help bridge some of these skill gaps where, you don't need to have this senior cyber analyst or an entire team of internal, threat hunter type folks who, by the way, mostly are now flocking to large enterprises that are paying them way more than you can afford to pay them. But you can use some of these tools to, bridge that gap and kind of get a little bit closer to being able to respond to some of this stuff. So I'd love to hear your commentary on kind of how some of that is evolving. But the other side of that coin that I also want to hear commentary on is, I use ChatGPT and Gemini and these tools all the time in my day-to-day, and they're wrong 30% of the time. When you're wrong about something like a security incident or how should I configure this or are those ports open or whatever it is, that can be dangerous. So again, talk to me a little bit. I like the sort of dichotomy here, both sides of the coin. Let's hear your perspective on, do you agree that these tools are helping, more junior and mid-level technicians kind of put on the security hat and bridge that skill gap? But at the same time, what's the risk of kind of letting Skynet make some big decisions and maybe we don't have enough expertise to know if it's doing a good job or not?
Yeah, so to your point, I think that it's even before the knowledge, it's even before the technician, that can be better with, with the generative AI. It's more about the data that you can actually correlate across the different tools that you have in order to leverage LLMs in the right way. Because if you don't have all the data or all the detections coming into one place, it can be a SIEM, it can be, a data lake, whatever, by the way, this SIEM market is changing so fast, like in 2 years from now, people won't use SIEM, people will use data lakes, but, this is a different discussion. But in order to put AI to work, you need to have all the detections coming into one place. And from that point, you can actually start to have context and start to connect the dots. So this is the foundational, like in order to put AI to work. Obviously, triage without context, without the ability to see different, detections coming from different, attack vectors, it's like, it's not the right way to do it, So to put things in perspective, first, as an industry, as the MSP industry, I think that we need to shift from silo detection into a unified data lake. And from that point, once we have a unified data lake, then we can put AI to work. And that's exactly actually what we are trying to do, like we are trying to connect the dots across all the, the necessities of attack vectors or, necessity security controls that you have out there in order to actually get the best data and actually to correlate and put AI to work in triaging alerts and, remediate threats and improve the mean time to detect, mean time to response. Because in this age of, in this area, you need to know that your business is targeted and your clients will be breached. It's just a matter of time, obviously. Or the threat actor is already there and is waiting for the right time, to act. And this is a shift in the mindset. This is a shift in perspective. Once you understand that point, you can think about, okay, now what I need to do better than the highly fragmented tool stack that I purchased in the last 5 years.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think and hope that we are seeing that shift in mind. 5-7 years ago, it was still, maybe even slightly more recently than that, oh, I'm too small to be targeted, right? No one is interested in my business. I think there's just enough education and enough just sort of, mainstream media examples of not just the big enterprises getting, successfully infiltrated, but the ease with which bad actors can, at a high sort of transactional volume rate, if I spend a year, trying to break into a large enterprise to extort, $250,000 or $500,000, or if I can take that same amount of time and get into hundreds of businesses that I can take $5 or $10 from each, it's the math and the financial, payouts are arguably becoming more favorable when folks are going after these smaller organizations. So my hope is that is better understood today than it was, because I think that was a huge part of the challenge for MSPs in monetizing this stuff. As we talked about when we first kicked off the episode, it was very hard to go to a client and say, hey, you're already paying me. I've already been protecting you, obviously, and I'm helping manage IT. However, things are changing. It's getting tougher. I need to expand my tool set, and now I need to charge you more money for these more advanced security services. I think there was a period where it was just very difficult to get the average SMB to understand and appreciate those dynamics. Part of that might be on the MSP for misrepresenting, earlier on what was actually being covered or what was not being covered, and maybe there's opportunities for a bit more transparency there. But in any case, my hope is that folks have kind of woken up to that fact, and I think you're right that people are appreciating now, it's not really a matter of if, but it's when, and when that moment comes, will you be ready either to, prevent something bad from happening, or if you can't do that, to be able to detect and respond when someone has, successfully made their way in, and if all else fails, I suppose, to be able to kind of restore and recover and take an effective backup and get out of a bad situation like ransomware or some sort of worst case scenario where, you're just in some sort of lockdown. So anyway, you talked about a couple of these examples that I think are interesting where we're seeing some of the technology play out. I agree with you in this concept of there's so much data, right? If one thing is just growing exponentially and endlessly, it is just the volume of data. I don't have a statistic in front of me, but I imagine the like the rate at which data is doubling, it has had to have just increased astronomically in these last couple of years, which means there's a lot more alerts, there's a lot more to intake, there's a lot more to analyze and sort of unpack. What are some of these examples where we think the tools can really help? Something that, came to mind for me as one sort of starting point. I think of kind of user credentials and logins and MFA as one easy sort of access point to identify potential, phishing or smishing or different types of social engineering. Are these tools doing a better job today and potentially, helping take a low-level task away from humans of saying, oh, it looks like Dor just logged in to, update the latest financial, spreadsheet, but wait a minute, his IP is pinging from somewhere in Russia. That's not where he's based. Are the tools doing a better job of being able to identify some of this stuff? Do you see AI helping us make progress in those areas where it can, sort of sniff out some of those warning signs that maybe MSPs don't have the staff or the time to be, sitting at a console every day looking for that sort of suspicious activity?
Yeah. So the short answer is yes, definitely. Definitely AI is a force, majority of power that is adding into this, connecting, the dots between, like what's going on the identity, what's going on the email, on the device, all those things related to the user. But with that being said, if you don't have, a unified approach to manage your tools, you are lost in the wilds because AI won't solve this problem. If you have like a silo detection, if you have few different vendors doing few different bunch of things, if you have your traditional email security from X, I won't mention vendors. If you have your EDR from Y and you have your identity management from Z and you have your awareness training from, from the other guy, AI won't solve this problem. AI won't help you to actually get on top of threats in a unified approach because first of all, you need to bring all of your security controls into one data lake. And from that point, you can put AI for work and AI is an amazing addition to the team by triaging, by taking all the different, like tier 1, tier 2 investigations and actually what we are doing is actually putting AI to work in automating detection and response. So we can support scale in a cost-effective way, and we can reduce the mean time to detect, mean time to response. As an MSP in 2025, 2026 and beyond, all it matters is the mean time to detect, mean time to respond on a user-centric approach. Because if you are just looking on endpoint, it's good, but it's not good enough. If you are just looking on the email, it's good. You're still doing something, but you are losing, the whole point of having this visibility across all of your detections, across all of your tools.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And I clearly am hearing you consistently talk about this idea of the data lake and sort of bringing everything together. I'm curious, there's clearly a platform and a technology component of that. I imagine there is also some people and process components of that. So talk to me a little bit about, okay, you're going to pick a tool, you're going to find a way to bring all this information under one roof so it can be analyzed more effectively. I imagine that to some extent sort of changes some of the kind of roles and responsibilities and just sort of the standard operating procedure. You're sort of shifting the way you run your MSP in a sense. And we can probably talk about through a cybersecurity lens. You could probably talk about that through a general business lens, frankly. But I'm curious, outside of the technology, which is, okay, we're gonna build an ocean and bring everything into it, what are the other aspects of kind of people and process that our listeners should think about as they prepare to kind of centralize all that security data and signaling and kind of get rid of these silos in the ways that we're talking about?
Yeah, it's about taking your existing, talent and leveraging them in a different way. Because your existing talent, your existing tier 1, tier 2 technicians, what they are doing today, for example, and I can give you a day-to-day, example, like you got a phishing email on one of your clients. The tool that you are using didn't detect this phishing email. And one of the users in this organization reported a phishing email. Now your tier 1 technician is going and is checking this phishing email, trying to investigate this email. and he's trying to go to different, data repositories, and he's trying to clean all of these, emails from other, users or other organizations, and blah, blah, blah. All this stuff is being, transitioned into a pure play AI detection and response.
Right.
And then your tier 1, tier 2 technicians can actually do better work in strategize, what is your security operation should look like. Or they can do other work in your overall IT organization, or better support, better time to detect whatever. So, and this is just a small example, but, there are dozens of, day-to-day examples in an MSP operations today.
It makes a lot of sense. And I also think what's interesting and makes these ideas feel a little bit more accessible is, they're not new in this space. Maybe they're newer as it relates to security, which is, a much more modern discipline, right? For like in relative terms for this market. But, you think of a time when folks had to go, physically touch a box in order to reboot it, or, your level 1 techs are spending all their time, manually resetting passwords and giving MFA token, things that are now automated and can be done with the click of a button and don't require humans to do all of the button pushing and the heavy lifting to accomplish a task, or, scripts that can, batch 5 jobs together that used to have to be done in sequence one at a time, right? That idea of consolidating work, becoming more efficient, bringing automation into the fold, and increasing speed, which is such an important metric in this market. Again, security and just sort of IT service delivery in the most general sense, being able to increase that speed is really critical. So I don't think it's a surprise to most folks that, the idea is that we need this kind of symbiotic partnership between the technicians and AI, and that we can sort of redeploy and level up these folks in different ways so that, they're doing work that hopefully is more fulfilling and more impactful. And I mean, I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning excited to do password resets, right? As a silly example. But understanding what that relationship looks like and sort of building that partnership, I don't know if folks know how to do that. So you've talked about some of that here. Are there other tips or recommendations, like, are successful MSPs training and enabling their team, not just on specific tools, but also on the use of LLMs and these other disciplines? Like I imagine we can't just leave everybody to go figure it out for themselves. So maybe I'll try to ask the question this way. Yes, there's tool purchasing and there's configuration and all of that, but in terms of MSPs beginning to embrace what we might call a culture of AI, what are your thoughts or kind of high level, recommendations or insight? Because, one of the great ironies, I think, of this market is MSPs are at the cutting edge of technology. They're responsible for keeping their customers ahead of the curve, yet at the same time can be very resistant to change and not want to, sort of push through that barrier and embrace the next generation of whatever is coming. So what does it look like in your experience to begin to build, in the same way that several years ago we would have talked about building a culture of security, right? That's probably a better parallel. What does it now look like to bring AI into that culture? And as a CEO and a founder and someone who has a lot of experience kind of leading teams through these transformational periods, what's some advice you can give leadership within MSPs who are trying to figure out how to get their organization to that next step?
It's a great question. I think it's about exposure.
Mm-hmm.
You need to expose your team to what's out there in order to let them, be inspired. Because if you tell your technician just use AI, it won't take you. It won't take you to the right direction. It won't take your organization in the right direction. It's more about, like, hey, listen, guys, this is how things are happening in a different category. Now let's think, let's get inspired how we can do it in our MSP delivery. And it can be all sorts of things from onboarding a new client to streamline and operationalize security into day-to-day IT operations. It can be on all. And I think that, we are living in such an amazing time of technology. It's better than the internet evolution, like in terms of, the size and, the velocity of, the development of AI LLMs and stuff. And I'm super excited about, the what the future was for us, as an industry, as a community, as the MSP community. And I'm super grateful, to be in this market at this time, leading the evolution and the transformation of cybersecurity. And I'm encouraging, folks, to get in touch with me, and we can help, we can be the force of, navigating your AI journey, specifically in cybersecurity, but in general, as a business, we are embracing AI across all different fronts. For example, we are embracing AI in our customer relationship management. For example, we have now AI in all of our support operations, as a company.
Right.
So on all the
analyzing sentiment and helping, triage and prioritize tickets and,
exactly,
making sure the right resources are being allocated. Yeah, we're seeing a lot of that here as well. And I think, it's not cybersecurity in the sense of like stopping a bad actor from hacking into your system, but there is, in the same way that security sort of became a wrapper around your entire business as an MSP, I think we are seeing, to some extent, AI becoming an additional sort of a layer or another, ring on the tree trunk, if you will, that it has some role to play across pretty much every function of the business. Now, it doesn't mean you're going to go take your annual budget planning and outsource all your financial modeling to ChatGPT and just hope that it doesn't, fudge the numbers, but finding the opportunities, finding the pockets, finding the sweet spots, and making sure that you've got humans to kind of validate and react to and train the models so that they're, doing their jobs properly. It does seem like there's tremendous opportunity to be pretty transformational across many kind of functions and departments in an IT business.
Absolutely agree with you. And I think that the AI won't replace humans in the perfect future, but the AI...
Say more about that, because I feel like that's the big scary concern. Oh, they're coming for all of our jobs, and people are worried about that they're not going to be redeployed, but that they'll just they won't no longer have a role to serve. I mean, to me, it's clear that these tools, even though they've gotten crazy advanced and smart, any tool, whether it's a simple calculator or the fanciest, language model, is still only as good as the person who's sitting at the controls behind it. Yet I still hear so much concern and fear and kind of rumbling about, the being displaced by these tools. So talk to us a little bit more about why that isn't happening anytime soon.
It won't happen, I think, in the future in general, because what AI is going to do for the life of the MSP, our life in general, is just going to make us 10x better. And that's a beautiful, analogy to think about, like if you can be 10x better with something that is off the shelf, like technology that is being offered for you, for a reasonable price, why won't you use it?
Right.
Why won't you start moving in that direction? And I think that, if we take one, specific, outcome from our conversation about AI, is get your team inspired by what's going on in other categories. Because if you just think about the MSP category, then you have like kind of, this view. But if you think about, what's going on in other categories, then you can get inspired about what AI can drive for you down the road.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I think the difference between, and again, it's as true with AI as it is with other sort of disciplines or change that you're trying to instill in your business. The difference between inspiring and rallying and getting your team excited about something versus, just sort of forcing and dropping a bunch of marching orders into folks' lap, just a very different kind of mindset and psychology and approach there. So I do think that is pretty sage advice. Find ways to inspire your team, get them excited, make them a part of the journey, not just telling them what we're going to do, but allow them to bring some of their ideas and their research and their thinking to the table. And, together you can build the right process and the right guardrails and make sure that, the right information is being used in the right ways and tools are being configured properly and all of that. But, I think of, I don't know, the shift from like being a break fix shop toward an MSP and the shift from security living at the office to then living at the endpoint and now arguably living more at the kind of identity level than anything. And, these you're just not going to remain competitive if you can't figure out how to, no one is opening a new break fix shop today and thriving. So I think we're still in a little bit of a grace period right now where some folks are doing it and some folks aren't doing it. A couple of years from now, that gap will exist, and you'll either be, with the folks that have figured it out, or you won't. And I think it's just one of those things. Just like an MSP cannot really succeed without delivering some form of security service right now, it likely is going to become difficult to really grow and thrive and scale, in the future without having not only some internal adoption and usage of these tools, but also the ability to help clients figure it out and embrace. I'm sure SMBs are calling their MSP all the time right now. Hey, can I use this? How do we get that 10x, efficiency? And they're looking for coaching and guidance and implementation and management of those solutions as well. So it feels like another one of those sort of paradigm shifts where, there will be a separation from those that are successful and those that are stuck based on their ability to get this stuff figured out and get it embedded in their day-to-day, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. As an MSP, in the age of AI, you need to think about better operationalizing your business. It can be like day-to-day operations. It can be better operational security. It can be growth. It can be how you can take AI and put it into your business to better operationalize it altogether.
Great. Okay, awesome. I'll ask you one last question, and since we're sort of looking forward and down the road a little bit, this would be a good place to maybe wind things down. You've talked about a couple of sort of interesting kind of macro changes that we're starting to see or that we expect to see as AI continues to make its way into the security space. These large data lakes forming that can pull information into one place for better processing and analysis. The kind of redeploying of humans to bridge that skill gap and to turn folks into prompt engineers and data aggregators and sort of system analysts in ways that maybe level 1, level 2 techs are not used to doing, as much in their day-to-day. What else do we expect to sort of see? I'll give you another example, and then I'm curious what else is on your mind. For me, I think, and we talked about this a little bit with some of the kind of anomaly detection and those small examples earlier, I think preventive security will become stronger than it's ever been, right? These tools should be able to do a much better job of kind of finding those early detection signs. And what doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, doesn't mean there's never going to be false positives, but the ability for these tools to kind of recognize potentially suspicious and malicious activity and do a better job of collating and organizing that, I think that's getting supercharged right now. So to me, doesn't mean, again, detection and response still critically important. Restore and recovery still critically important. The whole, in my mind, the sort of NIST framework is appearing. That whole sort of sequence of events is still unbelievably critical, and you need to address all of it. However, I think preventive security is going to get quite a big boost here. What are some of these other large changes that you guys expect to see, whether it's from a technology perspective, whether it's kind of process-wise, whether it's maybe the way SMBs think about kind of purchasing these services or the relationship that might change between an SMB and their MSP, but what other sort of very high level kind of evolution might you expect in these next couple of years now that AI and these models are clearly being injected, into the day-to-day of a lot of these tools and process that kind of leading MSPs are adopting?
Yeah, it's a great question. Our vision is to correlate detection and response with the posture management. Like if you think about it, today you're doing some posture management, configuring the tools, making sure that they are up and running. And then you think about detection and response, finding the right threat, remediate it, and that's it. And there is kind of, different words in detection and response and posture management. And our vision is to bring it all together because Guardz is able to actually connect the dots on a different security controls, but it's natively built into the Guardz platform. So we are also able to do the posture management, and that we think is the right way to go going forward. Is the correlation between, obviously you need to do a great job in detection and response, but you also need to do a great job in posture. And if you connect those, two words into one, ecosystem, that's the way to go, and that's how cybersecurity should be delivered, going forward.
That's really interesting. So it's almost almost like a flattening or collapsing of, some of these kind of parts of the security chain that were previously thought of as separate or distinct. I think you're right. You do think of posture management as your configuration, your policies, or the tools up and running. It's have I sort of set the table correctly, maybe to oversimplify it, versus the much more kind of day-to-day firefighting mindset of, oh, there's something suspicious over there. It looks like someone's trying to, knock down the front door. Oh, these cameras are offline, whatever, right? Sort of metaphorically speaking, but kind of consolidating or bringing those things together to think about the infrastructure, the configuration, and the kind of prevention and detection of all this stuff as part of one ecosystem is a good word that you used. It really does. I think it all dovetails back to this idea of just getting everything in one room, right? Getting all these cards laid on the table, and in a similar sense, maybe, in this market, you can go buy a ticketing system, you can go buy an endpoint management system, you can go buy a documentation system, but you've also got access to these kind of larger, fully integrated platforms that do 10 things under one roof. It sounds like we're going to start to see more of that in the security market, which for the last several years has been a little bit more in the kind of fragmented point solution. You get your SIM over here, your EDR over here, your MDR over there. Now they are a bit technical and a bit nerdier of disciplines than some of those other functions. So it probably would have been hard for kind of one ring to rule them all to emerge in that way. But I hear you saying that that's where AI and access to data and information and processing power is now making that possible, where we will see these kind of unified security platform solutions in a way that we now have these kind of fully integrated IT management platforms that, in the beginning of this market, you had 5, 6, 7, 10 different tools, where now you can get one that will kind of check all those boxes on more the traditional IT management side.
Absolutely. That's the direction, and that's where the market is going, and that's where the MSP, community should go.
Yeah. Okay, great. This has been an awesome conversation. I love all the insight here. Dor Eisner, CEO and co-founder at Guardz. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to share some experience and expertise with our listeners here on the show.
Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for having me.
Okay, great. That'll do it, folks. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time on Synchronized.
Thank you for tuning in to Synchronized. If you found value in today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to Synchronized wherever you listen to your podcasts. Or visit us at syncromsp.com/podcast for more information. We look forward to guiding your journey from startup to scale up in our next episode. Until then, keep growing and innovating.